Hello. Welcome to Module 1 of the COVID-19 teaching series, Creating the Conditions for Successful Connected Face-to-Face and Remote Learning. In this module, we are going to explore the foundational work of making blended learning a success. Our learning intention for this module is I am learning how to create conditions for success for connected face-to-face and remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. We will know we've been successful if at the end of this module, we feel like we can create a supportive environment, face-to-face, blended and virtually, so that we truly become a community of learners. If we can assess our students to see what they know and determine what is essential for them to know. And finally, if we can create a classroom management plan for face-to-face, blended, and virtual learning. Our essential question for this module is, what are the conditions for successful, connected, face-to-face to remote learning? A few reminders before we get into the meat of the module. Number one, here are the guidelines sent out by the State Department regarding the time spent on schooling when learning remotely. Please take a few minutes now and review this chart. Reminder number two, teachers, take care of yourselves. And here are some good tips for doing just that. Set up a dedicated workspace, both in your classroom at school and at home. Be sure you have the items you need for teaching in this workspace. Create a virtual classroom as a background for your online learning, and we will talk more about that in just a minute. Create a morning routine. Maintain regular hours with scheduled breaks. Create an end of the day routine. Have a meaningful conversation with a partner colleague each and every day. And finally, the last reminder. We all know how important relationships are between teachers and students. Here are some tips for building and fostering those relationships in the virtual world. Number one, teacher empathy. We must be able to empathize with our students no matter what situation they're in. Number two, unconditional positive regard. In other words, they know we care about them and we love them no matter what. Number three, genuineness. Being genuine in front of them all the time. Number four, non-directivity. Don't make everything a battle, and don't go at it from the perspective of because I said so. There needs to be more to it than that. And finally, the encouragement of critical thinking. So let's begin with condition number one, creating the classroom environment face-to-face and virtually. Here is a Bitmoji virtual classroom. These can be personalized to reflect your content area and the interest of your students. Some other possibilities for these virtual classrooms. You could create one for each structure during your class time. Interactive read aloud, shared reading, small group instruction, independent reading, the mini lesson. You could create a space for whole group learning, a space for small group learning, and a space for one-to-one learning. Or you could create one for each small group that you're facilitating. For example, one room for word study, another room for reading a news story or book, and then a different room for revisiting a familiar read to work on comprehension, a room for shared reading for fluency practice. These rooms can even be made to mimic your classroom at school to give kids that sense of connection from what they're learning in the school classroom to what they're learning at home remotely. These rooms can even include virtual links for students to click on to learn even more. So let's look at that. To grow general background knowledge about best practices for remote learning, please click on the lady in the chair. It will take you to a PDF from the TEALS program. TEALS is an acronym for Technology, Education, and Literacy, the program from Microsoft. Be sure to use the table of contents in this 8-page PDF to guide what information you need about remote learning. Some highlighted mentions are page 3 defines terms commonly used in remote learning, and building a community of learners is discussed on page 4. So I go over here, I click on the lady, and here it takes me to this PDF. And here's the table of contents. Here are how they're alike and different, remote and in-person teaching, some virtual learning definitions. So use the table of contents to guide what it is that you need to know. Next slide. You're probably familiar with this checklist. We've used it for years. Use it as a resource as you're building your physical classroom and your virtual classroom. And don't forget that one idea might be to create your virtual classroom to look like your physical classroom in order to give your students a sense of connection from the classroom learning to the remote learning, and just some safety and normalcy. So as you look at this checklist, ask yourself, how will I create the classroom environment for face-to-face instruction? And how will I create the classroom environment for remote instruction? Teacher clarity is always important in teaching and learning, but it is especially important when the learning must go remote. Here is a list of areas where we as educators need to be explicitly clear in face-to-face learning, but especially in remote learning. Tell, teach, try, that's the third, beside the third bullet, is a great format for being clear and explicit during a mini lesson. We look a little more closely at this mini lesson structure in the Teaching for Impact and Engagement during COVID-19 module, which is module 3. So in order to have that teacher clarity, make sure that kids have learning intentions with success criteria. In other words, learning intentions, just like we did for this PowerPoint. I am learning too. And then the success criteria would be those specific things. I can do this. I can do this. That would let a child know, hey, I've learned this. That's important in face-to-face learning, but it is very important in remote learning. Clarity of organization. Make sure that any task, assessments, and activities that you give students are aligned to the learning intentions and the success criteria. Bullet 3, that clarity of explanation. When you teach a mini lesson remotely, it's a little bit shorter than when you do it face-to-face. And tell means tell the students what they're learning, why they're learning it, and how they will know they've learned it. That's success criteria. And then teach them how to do something, preferably a demonstration over an explanation. And then give them a minute to try it with you right there to coach in to make sure everybody knows how to do it before they go off to practice on their own. Bullet 4, clarity of examples and guided practice. And again, this refers to the try part of the mini lesson. Make sure that that lesson moves the students towards independence. And then clarity of assessment of student learning. And that is telling the students how you're going to assess their learning, but also it's you keeping up, having a system and keeping up with who's learning what so that you can more personalize their instruction. Before we leave environment, here is one idea for the physical environment in a classroom that would allow for small group work and small group instruction while keeping students protected. This teacher used materials from Dollar General, PVC pipe and clear shower curtain liners, and then attached the shower curtain liners to the PVC with Velcro to create almost like sneeze guards, so that kids are not spitting on each other as they talk to each other and different things like that to hopefully keep everybody safe. So, do you feel more informed about how to create an environment for your students, both physically and virtually? Our learning goal, remember, is, or our learning intention, I am learning to teach during the COVID-19 pandemic, both synchronously and asynchronously. Synchronously could be face-to-face, but it also could be virtually, but in the presence of the teacher live. Asynchronously is not live. The success criteria for this part of the module, if you can say, I can create a supportive environment both face-to-face and virtually so that we can become a community of learners, then you will know that you have been successful in this portion of the module. And look at the quote down there. Your classroom environment speaks to your students before you utter a single word. What is your classroom saying? It's just a great thing to keep in mind as we're creating this environment, both physically in the classroom and virtually with our Bitmoji classroom. So, condition number 2, assessing students and determining what is essential for them to know. So, environment is a huge condition for success in teaching. But so is this. Being able to assess what kids already know and then what we need them to know is huge. Module number 2 in this series goes into great detail on how this can look. Here we are just hitting the highlights because it is a condition for success in face-to-face, virtual, and blended teaching and learning. So what do we need to know about our students? Look and read through the list on the left. These are the 5 basics that we really do need to know about our students. What they can do as decoders, what they can do as comprehenders, what they can do as writers, what they can do as communicators, and how they're doing socially and emotionally. On the right-hand side are the assessments that can get us there. The universal screener, short informal running records, writing samples, writing in response to the text used in the running record so that you can see how they write about their reading. And then observations of interactions, teacher to student and student to student for that social emotional piece. The universal screener is going to be very important in this work because for most of us, the last benchmarking data we collected from students was probably back in December. So the universal screener can be given right away and serve as a current data point to help determine where to begin. A good rule of thumb in determining what needs to be taught whole group versus small group and one-on-one will be whatever skills are revealed and less than 80% of the kids have mastered those skills, those are probably going to be a great place to go for whole group instruction. When using a running record with a student, keep in mind whether the issue with the reading is more of a print issue or a comprehension issue. Coordinate the results of the running record with the screener results in order to get a better picture of the child as a reading. Writing in response to a text also needs to be considered when creating this whole picture of the child as a reader. The writing sample will let you know what the child can do as a writer. And then, like I said, observing that child interact with you and with other children will really be a pretty good indicator as to the social emotional wellness of the child. Determining priority standards based on student data. There are lots of definitions for priority standards out there. Most people want a generic list of, hey, teach these essential standards. The Office of Standards has provided us with guidance around priority standards, and we should use that. Likewise, children are different and they have different needs. And the priority standard of one student may differ greatly from what is a priority standard for another student. So the process above on this slide is for a school in vertical teams to determine priority standards for its students based on data and these three conditions for priority, which come from Larry Ainsworth's work in Power Standards, identifying the standards that matter most. So let's look at this. Number one, what does the data, which could be the universal screener, running record, anything else you may have, indicate is a priority for this group of students, this class group, grade level group? Make a list of those. Then you ask yourself these three questions for each of those standards. Is this learning essential for future learning, either in this grade or in the next grade? If so, it probably needs to stay in. Is this learning enduring? And that refers to, is it something the child is going to use over and over and over throughout their school career and into their career? And then finally, is this learning that students will use not only in this class, but in other classes as well? If those standards meet those three criteria, and they're based on your student data in your school, then those are priority standards for your school, and they should be taught explicitly instead of embedded in other learning tasks. If you want additional information on priority standards, click on this link below to read an overview of what priority standards are and the process for identifying them as a group think tank. So I'm going to take you there very quickly and let you see. This is a blog entry, but it is based on Larry Ainsworth's work. And so just to scroll through to let you see, here's a rationale for why we prioritize standards. Here are those three criteria that I was just talking about. And then they take each criteria and explain it in more detail. And then here's an overview of the process to determine what are power standards. And here are even some misconceptions about power standards. And I want you to see that one on the bottom. That power standards are the only standards to be taught. We know that's not true. They are standards to be prioritized and taught explicitly, but no standards should be left out. Okay, so let's go back to the module. Analyzing standards to craft specific teaching points. Once we've determined which standards are to be prioritized, then we go about the work of crafting explicit teaching points for these standards. Here is one way to drill down to the explicit teaching points contained within the standard. Remember, as you do this work, students should be told what they're learning, why they're learning it, and how they will know that they've achieved success in learning it. Keep this and the tell, teach, try structure in mind as you craft these explicit teaching points. This work is best done as a grade level team. It's great PLC work. So look at the first question. What concepts does the standard require the students to know? Look at the nouns contained within the standard. That goes directly to the concepts. What skills does the standard require the students to know and use? Look at the verbs in order to get the skills. And then you craft explicit teaching points for that standard being taught. Turn this teaching point into an I can statement to create a learning intention with success criteria. So let's look at that. Here's an example of 2 of the 4 teaching points contained in Standard 13 of reading literary text in our South Carolina ELA standards. Reading for enjoyment, acquiring new learning. So some explicit teaching points could be, today, I am going to teach you how readers learn to enjoy reading by choosing books based on interest and reading ability. If we enjoy what we are reading, we read more. And if we read more, we become better readers. Watch me. And I like to always try to end with watch me because it lets me know, it's a reminder to me that, oh, I need to demonstrate how I do this. Did you notice the repetition of today I'm going to teach you? And did you notice that how after the word by, I gave some more specifics about how we're going to go about doing this? Make sure you do that in your work. So here's the second example. Today, I'm going to teach you how we use reading to acquire new information by choosing a topic we want to learn more about. It is important we know how to learn about stuff from reading so we can learn what we need to learn when we need to learn it. Watch how I do this. And then I would move into the teaching part, the demonstration. So there are 2 other main parts to this standard: building stamina, reflecting, responding to increasingly complex texts. You try it now. With your group, try to craft explicit teaching points for building stamina and reflecting and responding to text. Remember to ask yourselves as you're doing this, did you tell the students what they were learning and why? Did you include a strategy or a way of doing the work after the word by in your teaching point? And then did you end it with the directive of watch me? So now we are listing success criteria for students in the form of I can statements, so they will know what success looks like. This is especially important in remote learning, so kids will know, hey, I've learned how to do this. Notice the success criteria are very specific actions the student should be able to do once they've learned the skill or the strategy. This list is not exhaustive. It will depend on strategies or ways you taught them how to do this work. Try writing success criteria for reading independently to acquire new learning. Share with each other now and give each other feedback. You may pause the module to do this work. So the learning intention is I am learning to read for enjoyment by choosing books that interest me and that I can read accurately. This is my example. So some success criteria would be I can examine books to choose the ones I'm interested in reading. I can determine if a book will be harder or easier for me to read. I can pretend to be a character or a person from a text that I am reading. So there's my example for reading for enjoyment. Now you try it with reading independently to acquire new learning. And again, pause the module here to do this work together. So our learning goal is I am learning to teach during the COVID-19 pandemic, both synchronously and asynchronously. And remember, synchronously could be face-to-face in the classroom, or it could be virtually, but live with the teacher. Asynchronously is not live. And our success criteria for this portion of the module, I can assess my students to see what they know and determine what is essential for them to know. So now let's, after revisiting this learning intention and success criteria, do you feel better equipped to determine what your students know and need to know? Finally, the third condition for success in face-to-face, remote, or blended learning is the classroom management plan. So let's take a look at how to create a classroom management plan for both synchronous and asynchronous learning. So a classroom management plan begins with a statement that reflects your learning philosophy for students and parents. Here's an example. I value an environment that allows people to take risks and make mistakes. We are all learning new things and we are here to help each other. Do you notice how that statement tells parents what you value and also sets the expectation that we're going to take risk in this environment together, but that it's going to be safe? Establishing norms as part of this classroom management plan. So remember to include norms for face-to-face and remote learning, especially if you're going to be teaching in a blended learning model. An example is provided. Look at these. Be open to spend the time it takes to learn. Be adaptable to your learning and the learning of others. Make this a safe space for yourself and others. Understand that learning is a process that requires patience with yourself and with others. Embrace a love of learning. Take a minute and pause the module here and just talk about what you notice as a group about these norms. The thing I notice first is that they're all written affirmatively. This is not a list of what not to do, but it is a list of what to do. And that's huge for classroom norms. From the norms come classroom agreements. These agreements should communicate teacher expectations for the class, for face-to-face learning, and for remote learning. And so these well-crafted classroom agreements really do communicate teacher expectations for the class. Again, remember to create these for face-to-face, blended, and virtual learning spaces. State them positively, make them specific, Post them in the classroom, whether it's live or virtual. Teach them to the students. An example would be, we will keep our video on the entire time we are learning together remotely. So here's another virtual classroom. And in this virtual learning space, you can click on the lady to read more about classroom management plans from a one-page overview from Fisher, Frey, and Hattie in their new book, The Distance Learning Playbook. Also, you can click on the Classroom Norms poster to watch a video from this book of a teacher talking about creating classroom agreements for remote learning with her students. So I'm just going to give you a brief look, and then you can go there and actually look. So here is the PDF of the one-pager, which is just an overview of developing the classroom management plan. And then when I click on the norms, I am taken to this video, which you can go there now and watch this teacher talk about creating classroom agreements with her students. A reminder of what must happen when students are with the teacher face-to-face or live in a synchronous learning experience. These are must-dos when students and teachers are in presence together. Assessment for and of learning must take place. Modeling and demonstration of new learning must take place. Guided practice with feedback is huge so that kids know what to go off and practice remotely through authentic reading, writing, and thinking. And lastly, goal setting with success criteria so that goals, student learning goals, can follow the child from their classroom work and learning to their remote work and learning. So whether you're teaching in a virtual model, a blended model, or 5 days face-to-face, these bulleted items must occur in the presence of the teacher. Ensuring the learning we do face-to-face connects to the learning we do remotely. This is so important. The teaching and learning must connect face-to-face learning with remote learning. Two ways to do this are to use project or problem-based units of study for students to continue learning, even remotely, through authentic reading, writing, and communicating and thinking with others when at home, and goal setting, so that those student learning goals follow the students from the classwork and classroom learning to the remote work and the remote learning. This is very important for face-to-face learning, as we all know, but it is even more important for successful remote learning to develop and teach those procedures for organization and routines, providing weekly and monthly schedules for students and their families, providing a daily agenda at the beginning of the class, teaching students how you will signal transitions, especially thinking through that, y'all, virtually. And then creating and teaching procedures for getting materials and creating and teaching procedures for turning in work. This is part of that classroom management plan. So our learning goal for this module has been, I am learning to teach during the COVID-19 pandemic, both synchronously and asynchronously. Our success criteria for this portion of the module is I can create a classroom management plan for both synchronous and asynchronous learning. And then there's just a reminder of the terminology. And to be sure and share this plan with families. So now ask yourself, do you feel better equipped to create a classroom management plan that includes plans for both face-to-face and remote learning? And then this is back from the beginning of this module, our original learning intention, which I will not read again, and all 3 success criteria from each portion of the module. Hopefully this module has served to grow your knowledge of blended and remote learning during this COVID-19 pandemic. And in the words of Mary Poppins, well begun is half done. And we're hoping that this module will give you a strong beginning, and so that half the battle will be done. Here are the resources used in designing this module. The Distance Learning Playbook by Fisher, Frey, and Hattie, and the Teacher Clarity Playbook by Fisher and Frey. They are full of insightful and relevant information. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck on your face-to-face, remote, and/or blended learning models journey.